Welcome to the Collide Kids podcast, hosted by Christen Clark. This is a show for kids and families. You are going to meet new people and have fun while you listen. Let's do it!
Hey, y'all, welcome to the Collide Kids podcast. I'm your host, Christen Clark. The Collide Kids podcast is a show for kids and families where we learn together how life and faith collide. I am so glad that you're listening today. Thank you so much for being here and spending this time with me. If this is your first time listening, I just want to say welcome. I'm glad you're here. Be sure to listen to the end of every episode. That's where we have the kids only segment where kids just like you get to be on the podcast. Well, if you're listening today and you feel like, man, my friend needs to hear about this or needs to hear this conversation, or maybe they just need to know about a great kids podcast, would you do me a big favor and share this with them? Send it to them in a text or maybe share it on your social media. Let other people know that you listen. It's a great way to let someone else know you're thinking about them, and also a great way to get the word out about the Collide Kids podcast. Well, I'm really excited about our guest today. I met Corinne Noble a few months ago, and we have a lot of mutual friends that work with kids and kids ministry leaders, and she's just such a fun and creative person. So I was so excited that she accepted my invitation to be on the show. Corinne loves all things creative and kids ministry. She's a creative communicator and a freelance writer. She's married to her husband, Sean, and they have two precious and lively little boys named Peter and Andrew. In her spare time, she enjoys baking, going to Disneyland with her family, and traveling to new and exciting places. I love having conversations with people that work with kids, and I think you guys are really going to enjoy this conversation with my friend, Corinne Noble. Corinne, I am so excited to have you on the Collide Kids podcast.
Yes, thanks so much for having me.
This is so fun. We have a lot of mutual friends, and people have always said, "Oh, you need to get to know Corinne. She's so fun." So I'm so excited to have you on the show and to get to know you better. Would you just introduce yourself to our listeners? Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yes, my name is Corinne. So I'm actually not a kids pastor right now, but I've been in kids ministry for a long time. My favorite age group is older kids, like preteen age, 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. But now I create a lot of resources. I create curriculum for kids ministry. I create family resources. I create all kinds of fun things and travel around speaking. And I love speaking to kids, like I said, especially preteens, but I also love just raising up leaders who can pour into kids as well.
That's awesome. I love that. What is it that you love about preteens?
Oh, man. I don't really know because a lot of people don't like to work with preteen age, but I love preteens because I think that they're like just old enough that they're like still kids, but they're also like, I don't know, they're starting to understand a lot more and like go deeper, and you can just kind of hang out and get to know them and have relationships with them. And they're just fun. I like playing with them and hanging out with them.
Yeah, I do too. I love that age group. And I think they're so creative and have great imaginations, and they know how to connect with friends in such a unique way. So yeah, I love hanging out with preteens too. Well, good. Okay, so I'm excited to talk to you more about this. But before we do that, because this is a show for kids, I always make my guests tell me a joke. So do you have a joke for us today?
Okay, yes. And I told you before we got on here that I'm not normally a joke teller, so I'm going to try not to mess it up.
Okay.
So here's the joke. Why was the math book sad?
Ooh, I don't know.
Because it had too many problems.
It did.
It's a mom joke.
Too many problems.
Grandpa, when I was a kid, he always told just like the silliest like dad grandpa jokes. And he would always say, if you would say, "Hey, grandpa," he would say, "Straw's cheaper." Like, hey, straw's cheaper. Yeah, I know. And I would always be like, "Grandpa, what?" So now I do stuff like that to my kids, and it's fun.
Exactly. That's great. Oh, that sounds like a fun grandpa. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about how you got started in what you're doing now, because you said you used to be a kids pastor, and now you're creating printables and resources and freebies. What made you want to do all of that?
I mean, honestly, God, totally, because When I was a kid, I was actually called to be a kids pastor, and I was like 10 years old. And, I thought that that's what it was going to look like for me forever, that I was just going to be a kids pastor at a church. And I loved being a kids pastor in churches. But when I was a kids pastor about 3 or 4 years ago, I was creating resources and curriculum and stuff while I was working at the church. And then I felt like God told me to start writing curriculum full time for kids ministries. So for a while I was doing both, which was a lot, to be honest. And then I had my first little boy named Peter, and things got really complicated, and COVID happened, and we all started working at home. So I know you guys all relate to that.
Yeah.
And through that process, I felt like God really released me from working in the church, and he just told me to keep doing the ministry stuff that I'd been doing kind of on the side, more as like my kind of full-time thing, but also so that I could full-time be a mom at home with my kids.
I love that. I think it's so interesting how many people's careers have changed or launched from COVID.
Both my husband and I ended up working from home and changing jobs through COVID. So honestly, it was all God, and it was so like such a blessing to us that all happened. So a lot of not blessings that happened during COVID, but that was definitely a huge blessing for us.
That's so good. And I think it taught us too, like there's so many more options and things out there and things that we can do and still be connected at home as a family. So I love that you and your husband get to do that. That's great. Let's talk a little bit about what your job entails, because to write curriculum, to come up with things for kids ministries and for churches, you really have to be a creative person. So are you a super creative person all the time?
So, honestly, I feel like I didn't used to be super creative, and like I used to feel like I was more of like a type A, organized, like get things done, make to-do lists, like that type of person. Not so much a creative person, but as I started to do more creative stuff through kids ministry, I started like doing set designs and like decorations, and like I started realizing, like I can be creative, and I started like writing like 1 week curriculums that I would use with my kids. And I would do theme days, and we would do like video game theme day and like Lego theme day. And so I started to realize, wow, like I actually am creative. And I didn't know this, I just started to discover this new creativity in myself that I didn't realize was there. Honestly, over the years, I feel like I've become an extremely creative person, just continuing to create and just operate in the things that I feel like God has given me. I've just become more and more creative. So now I feel like I'm a really creative person. It's very interesting.
That's so fun. So what do you think it means for someone to be creative? What does that mean?
Yeah, I think that honestly, I had the wrong definition of creativity. And for so long, for so many years, I thought I wasn't creative because I really was like putting creativity in a box. It's crazy because creativity like literally cannot be contained. Like it is like it's creativity, right? But I was putting it in this box and thinking, okay, creativity is only people who can like draw really well or like paint beautiful pictures or, that type of thing. Like an artist was like a creative person. And I had a cousin who I grew up with who was very artistic, and he was like, he could draw anything. And he was just, to me, he was creative. And I was like, not, because I couldn't do that. So I would say creativity it's so hard to like even describe it because it really can be so different and unique for every person. So now I feel like I always tell people anybody can be creative and that God's given all of us creativity. We just have to discover and find out what that creativity looks like for us. So for me, like over the years, I started to discover, wow, there was creativity inside of me that I never knew about. And God helped me just like pull that out.
Yeah, that's so true. Because you're right. Like creativity is not just about being an artist, although we're very thankful for those people that are really crafty and can paint and build things. We're like, that's amazing. But then there's also parts of creativity that have to do with problem solving or finding ways to bring people together to make friends. So there's lots of different ways that you can be creative. And so that's so true. God made everyone to be creative.
Yes. I mean, creativity, for me, it looks like, writing now. And like, I even like create all kinds of stuff online that is like graphic stuff, but I don't have to draw it, right? I'm able to use other tools that help me create like social media stuff and graphics and all kinds of things like that. But all of that is creativity, even though I literally cannot draw at all to save my life.
That's so fun. And there's always a YouTube video to teach you how, right? If you need it.
Nowadays, yes. I mean, that we didn't have that when I was a kid.
Right.
Like I couldn't just like Google something and then just watch a video and learn how to do it. Like honestly, now we have so many resources and so many tools that yes, anybody can learn how to do almost anything if we really put our minds to it.
Absolutely. So let's think about that for a little bit. Why did God create everyone to be creative? What do you think that is?
You know, I think that's because like it goes back to just the fact that God is the creator, right? He's the creative creator and he created everything out of nothing and he created all of us in his image. So I really believe that if we're created in God's image, then if he's the creative creator, why wouldn't he make all of us to be creative as well? I mean, we're all created in his image. So he's created all of us with unique talents and giftings, and we can see creativity in each one of those things if we look for it, right? And if we hone in on it. So I think, again, it's like we think of one type of person as a creative, but all of us have that creativity inside of us and it's growing. And as we're developing it and we get older, we realize, wow, there's so much that I have to give that I didn't realize was inside of me.
Yeah. And what do you think the reason is? Like, what is it that we have to give? Like, does God want us to do something specific, or do you think it has to do with just learning to do something within yourself?
No, I mean, I think absolutely. For me, like the way that my creativity started to come out was just listening to God's call and listening to God's voice and him telling me to do things. I mean, I felt like he said, start doing this, right? And I was like, I don't know how to do this, God. Like, I didn't know how to do it on my own. I had to rely on God because without him, honestly, I never would have even tried to do the things that I've done in my ministry and even in my life. So I think it absolutely has to do with listening to God's voice. And he speaks to us even when we're kids, like when we get older, he keeps speaking to us. And if we're listening, he's going to give us plans and he's going to give us purposes. And we might not have any clue how we're going to do them. And we might not even think we know how to do them. But if we listen and we're just obedient with that, I think God, he gives us the tools and he gives us the resources and he helps us just become that creative person that he wants us to be.
Yeah. I think a lot of times it's hard for kids and for adults because we always want to compare what our talent is or what our creative outlet is to someone else's. Like, oh, they're this accomplished sculptor and they can take Play-Doh and make amazing things and I can only make a ball out of Play-Doh, you know? And so we compare to what other people do. And so we don't ever try. And that's the thing too, is like sometimes when God asks us to do something, it's because he wants us to learn through trying and failing and messing up and making mistakes and getting better the more we do it, right?
And if I could just tell you all of the times that I've tried something new and I've failed, honestly, like it's happened so many times and I have become okay with it and realized that that's just part of the learning process and part of the creative process, definitely. So yes, trial and error and failing, it's all part of the creative process.
Absolutely. You know what I heard recently, I'm reading this book and they were talking about how the younger we are, the harder it is for us to fail or to be able to fail. And so we end up not trying so much. And then we get older, we get a little bit better at failing or being, like you said, like we're just okay with it. So I think if we could put into practice this mindset of I'm going to try something and if I mess up, that's okay, then you're going to really set yourself up for being way more successful if you're always holding yourself back from trying new things. We'll be right back after this. You know, raising kids in the digital age isn't easy, but Bark Technology makes products that help parents keep their kids safe online and in real life. They have an app, a phone, and a home device that lets families set parental controls on their internet-connected devices. I love the app because it helps us manage screen time and blocks websites and apps we want our kids to avoid. It also sends alerts and gives us the ability to monitor texts and social media and even track your child's location. Visit bark.us to learn more about how you can keep your kids safe online. Use the code COLLIDEKIDS to get 15% off your subscription of the Bark app.
Yes, and I would completely agree with that. I mean, just coming from I feel like my innate personality, my normal personality is just very like perfectionist and like I always want to be right and I always want to do the right thing. And it was really hard for me at first to fail and mess up. But I agree with that. With age, the more that I do things, the more I'm okay with, I mean, doing my best, but not always having the outcome that I wanted.
When we are weak, then we are strong. That's what the Bible says. So when we know that we can't do it, we have to rely on God to help us. So that's so important.
And I think that that's God's strategy a lot. That's why he
True.
gives us things and he tells us to do things that we really don't know how to do because he wants us to trust him.
Absolutely. So how do people discover what their creativity is, or how do they discover creativity in their lives?
Well, the first step, it's like super simple. So I know anybody of any age can do this. And I wish someone had told me this when I was a kid. The first thing you have to do is stop saying that you're not creative. So if you're someone who's like, I don't think I'm a creative person, like just stop saying it. And the reason why that's like the first step that I always tell people, whether they're a kid or they're an adult, that's because I know that words are so powerful. And that's biblical, right? When we look at the Bible, we can see that there's so much power in the tongue. The Bible says that death and life are in the power of the tongue. So our words, especially the words that we speak to ourselves and over ourselves, they're so powerful. So when we say, I'm not creative or I can't do that, that's very powerful and it is negative. So we want to change that verbiage and start saying, I'm finding my creativity. So maybe you don't feel like you're creative yet. You can just say, hey, I'm finding my creativity. So that's like the first step. And that's like super easy in a way, but you just have to change the way you talk about yourself to yourself and to others. But another way for me is just finding things that make me feel creative and places that make me feel creative. So whether you're a kid or you're an adult, you can do this, right? You can kind of realize when you're doing an activity or you're in a place where you just feel very like yourself and you feel very creative and you get ideas, that's like a creative place for you, or that's a creative activity for you. So that's something maybe you want to do more often. That's going to help you get your creative juices flowing. I know that sounds silly, but honestly, it's totally true. Like I like to go in my backyard. Sometimes just being outside makes me feel more creative. Or I like to juggle. So I'm a juggler. If I juggle,
awesome.
like honestly, like because I've juggled for so long, it takes my mind off things and I get ideas. It just gets my creative juices flowing. Playing with magnetiles with my kids. My kids love to play with magnetiles, just building like new creations. Honestly, my 4-year-old, he's more creative than I am with magnetiles, and he's only 4 years old, but playing with him, that stretches my creativity and gets my creative juices flowing. So, that's going to be different for everyone. But, I've learned what places I'm most creative in and what things that I do that make me the most creative. And when I'm struggling with creativity, I'm going to go gravitate towards those places and those activities to get my creative juices flowing.
That's good. And I love magnetiles. They're so fun.
They are so fun, but honestly, I had no clue how to like build stuff with them until I had a 3-year-old in my home who taught me how to use them.
I remember when my kids were little, my son was obsessed with Legos. And so we would start building and putting things together. And then I would be building this tower or something, and I'd look around and my kids had already left the room and I was still sitting there building Legos. So like once you get started, you got to keep going with it.
I mean, and I really just, all I know how to do is build towers. But my kid, he will like build It's a Small World ride from Disneyland. And I'm like, wow, that actually looks like it.
That's awesome. So I love that idea too, just to get out, find a place where you can be creative. And then I would think too, just setting aside time to be intentional about that. Like asking God to help you. I interviewed Angela Marks a few months ago, and she shared that when she does her quiet time, she has stickers and markers, and it's this whole like crafting, scrapbooking, prayer process she does. And so we think like sometimes like, okay, when I read my Bible and I write down something or I read a devotional, that has to be boring. But that could be a really creative moment for you too.
Yeah, no, and I've seen that she does that, and I'm like, that is awesome. Like anything you need to do to like make spending time with God and spending time in his word something you want to do and something that you prioritize and not just something that you like forget about.
And then you've got glitter and stickers all over it too. Why
I
not?
mean, and I love glitter and I love stickers.
Right? The stickers make everything better.
They really do.
Well, Corinne, this has been so fun. Thank you so much for being on the show and sharing about creativity. It makes me want to go paint something now.
I mean, honestly, I love to create and now I do it almost every single day. So that's a big thing too, right? Just honestly practicing creativity.
Yeah.
Whatever you like to do that's creative, like just do it, do more of it, and you're going to get better at it.
Absolutely. Okay, before I let you go, I always like to ask my guests to tell me a memory from when they were a kid. So do you have a memory you want to share with us today?
Yes, and it has to do with creativity because I thought this would be fun. So I said before that I did not believe I was creative when I was a kid, and that was because I could not draw anything. And I really mean my stick figures did not look like stick figures. But one time when I was in school, I was 10 years old. So I was pretty old at this point, should be able to draw something somewhat decent, honestly. Yeah. And they told us that we had to take our shoe off and look at our shoe and draw our shoe. So I even had the shoe in front of me to draw. And by the end of it, I mean, honestly, you would have no clue it was a shoe at all. Like it literally looked like a lopsided boat. I mean, I don't even know how that happens. And honestly, I don't think I would be much better now. So that's just my fun story to remind everyone that, you can be creative even if you cannot even draw a shoe.
That's right. That is so true. Maybe you should practice that. See how you've improved since then.
I should try that. That would be a good exercise. I bet it would be just as bad.
That's awesome. Well, where can our listeners find more about you and find out about your resources that you have for families?
Well, I do a lot of kids ministry stuff, but I also do create some resources that would be great to use either in the home or the church, as well as some stuff that's specifically for the family. I create some like family devos every once in a while and just lots of like fun printables and like crafts and games and stuff that you could use at home. So I do have a website that's called KMCministries.com. So KMC and then ministries, plural.com. And then I am Kidman Corinne on Instagram, and I love to just post like silly, funny reels and also like kids ministry stuff. And I also post about my resources on there. And then I am just Corinne Noble and KMC Ministries on Facebook as well.
Perfect. I love that. And I love that you have resources for families and for churches and all those activity pages. That'll be really good for listeners to know about. So you guys definitely go check out Corinne and her stuff and check her out on Instagram. She's got a lot of good, funny videos. So, well, Corinne, thank you so much for being on the show today. This was so fun.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun.
That was such a fun conversation about creativity, one of my favorite topics. I love that she was sharing today about how she discovered later in life that she was creative. She always thought that a creative person was an artist or someone that was good at creative, artistic things, but it really can be so many different things. And God has given each of us abilities and talents and problem-solving capabilities and so many different ways that we can be creative. We just have to discover what it is and how to use it. I love when she said that God is a creative creator and he created each of us with unique gifts and talents in a way that we can be creative. And so we just have to listen to his voice and follow him and obey him and learn to rely on him as we explore these new things about us. Corinne also said we need to stop saying that we're not creative, even if we think we're not, but to start thinking in a different way about creativity. And she suggested getting into a place or an activity that helps you be creative. For her, it was juggling. For me, it's taking walks outside, or I love getting my brushes out and painting something. That just always sparks something creative in me. Well, if you'd like to learn more about Corinne and her amazing resources that she has, head over to kmcministries.com and you can download a bunch of fun freebies and find out more about the things that she offers for leaders and families to enjoy. Also, if you want to check check out the episode we talked about with Angela Marks. That was episode 136. I think you'll really enjoy my conversation with Angela as well. Well, now it's time for the kids only segment. This is the part of the show where you get to be on the podcast. So here is my friend Elizabeth.
How do you make a tissue dance? You put a little boogie in it.
A little boogie in it. That's one of my favorite jokes. I love that one. Thank you, Elizabeth, for sharing that joke with us. Hey, if you would like to share your favorite joke or maybe an encouraging quote that you like, or maybe you want to share a Bible verse that's your favorite, just head over to my website, collidekidspodcast.com, and click the tab at the top that says Kids Only. You can record it right there. It's really easy to do. Or you can send it to me through my social media. I'm on Facebook at the Collide Kids Podcast or on Instagram at Collide Kids Pod. And I would love for you to follow me there as well. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can do that, like we said at the beginning of the show, by sharing this episode with friends and family. You can also subscribe and follow this podcast on every podcast app you use, and be sure to leave a rating and a review. That's really helpful, and I love to read those and hear what you have to say about the show. You can also go by my website and click the link that says support, and anytime you think about it, I always appreciate your prayer support as well. Well, I hope you guys have an amazing week. I am so glad that you joined us today. Thank you for listening. And in case no one has told you today, I would love to be the first to remind you that God loves you so very much. Thanks for listening.
You don't have to go very far looking for bad news because somehow it just finds you. So finding peace in the chaos can be really difficult, but it doesn't have to be because the River mobile app exists. The River is a Christian music radio station dedicated to playing music to help you get through life's toughest moments or life's happiest moments and everywhere in between. And all from artists who love Jesus and are real people just like you. Listening is easy. You can download it wherever you get apps from. Just search 1049 The River or listen online at riverradio.com. And know that The River is proud to partner with the Collide Kids podcast.